Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist. Are you somebody who feels like the reason why you haven't recovered from binge eating yet is because you're not trying hard enough? This was my story for the longest time, and in this video I want to introduce you to the concept of the backwards law and how we might think about it in terms of binge eating recovery. So in summary, the backwards law states that the thing that we chase, the thing that we desperately want, we push it further away in our desperate wanting of it. So moving away from binge eating just for a moment, if we look at this in the dating world, maybe you know somebody who's desperate to find a partner, and you can see as the observer how that person's desperation may be the very thing that's pushing potential partners further away. Or take something like sleep. If you're struggling to sleep, the more important and desperate sleep is for you at that moment, the more likely you are to push it even further away. I think one of the ways people can know if binge eating is a problem for them is that it seems like the more you want to stop, the harder it seems to be to actually do it. And this is because of something known as hyper-intention. And hyper-intention is a very strong investment in the outcome that you want. And what this does is it creates a kind of blinkered effect. The outcome is, I don't want to binge, maybe I want to lose weight, and everything has to be heading towards that. So the minute it feels like you're veering off the path, catastrophic thinking comes in. And when we live in hyper-intention, it creates this state of anticipatory anxiety. We're hyper-vigilant now about our behaviour, about how close that goal is, or is the goal further away again? We're more judgmental, we're more disconnected from others and other sources of enjoyment and other places in our lives that might create a sense of meaning. The catastrophic thinking that being in hyper-intention creates seems to ruin everything. So I would experience that catastrophic thinking quite often before a binge, just by the fact that I wanted to binge and the feeling of inevitability that came with that. I already felt like I'd failed. I already felt like I'd messed up. Everything was terrible. What on earth made me think I could do anything differently? This is what's going to happen. All of that thinking would drive me into the binge. And then on the other side of it, I would feel hopelessness and I would feel despair. And then I would pick myself up and go, no, we've just got to try harder. Let me set a new plan. And that was Groundhog Day over and over again. In my battle to recover from binge eating, I reached this place, and I only recognise this in hindsight, what this was. I reached this place where I was thinking, okay, I still really want to stop binge eating. But I also recognise there are all these things in my life that I am putting on hold. I had all these things that I was going to do when I stopped binge eating. And I decided that I was willing to create a life, to live a life, even if it meant I still had to deal with binges. I would just figure out the best way to look after myself within that. And it wasn't my desired outcome. But in the acceptance of that, it really dialed the intensity down. The catastrophic thinking reduced. There was a couple of years where I was still having some binges, but I was getting really good at resetting myself and meeting myself with some kindness and some compassion. And then from that place, I was able to actually put into practice some of the things that I'd heard that could really help with binge eating recovery. It was from that place that I could really apply the principles of intuitive eating, for example. I couldn't do that when I was in hyper-intention. So what happened over that time then was that the binges became less intense. I started to feel like I had choices again, so I would still feel an urge for something. But because I wasn't catastrophizing the outcome, I wasn't hyper-intentional about what the outcome should be, I freed up choice. And you may think, well, that's all very well, but I don't want to spend another couple of years binge eating, and I don't want to accept this, and I don't want this outcome. I wasn't fully accepting that binge eating was okay for me. I knew it wasn't. I knew it made me feel out of alignment. I knew it was harming me. But instead of being hyper-intentional, that should mean and never binge again, and binging should stop, and my weight should decrease, and all these things should happen, I was willing to try and make the best of it. And I was willing to try and look after myself as somebody who was still stuck in this trap. So what those couple of years were they were actually about working on my relationship with myself. When I took the focus off of food and focused more on my emotions and how I was talking to myself, my internal I was going to say monologue, but it's probably more like a dialogue of different parts talking. When my attention was there, that's when I could start to make shifts, which I was then able to make with food. So let me put this into some practical terms for you. Viktor Frankl talks about the idea of paradoxical intention. And paradoxical intention is this idea of intending to create the very thing that you fear. When we become afraid of something, let's say a feeling or a state, we become afraid of it, we then feel fear in anticipation of that fear. And it's that anticipatory anxiety and fear that comes with hyperintention that then makes it feel impossible to face the very thing you fear. So let me ask you this. What is the one feeling that you would do anything to avoid if you could? Don't overthink it. Whatever comes to mind, that first one, just go with that. Now, paradoxical intention would advise you to take that feeling and say, okay, I want that feeling. Now, you may recoil to this because maybe your feeling was shame or guilt, fear, sadness, loneliness. These are the common ones that I hear. And when I say that, your mind might go, I do not want that. But let me ask you this. The fact that you struggle with binge eating, doesn't that create more of that feeling you don't want anyway? For me, one of the things that I really didn't want to feel, it was a type of loneliness, but it was disconnection. And it was disconnection from myself, from others, from the world. That was the thing that I really didn't want. And so I would binge to try not to feel that, but the very fact that I struggled with binge eating created more of that. So until I became willing to feel that disconnection and despair, nothing changed. So paradoxical intention would be about actually you're looking forward to the next time you feel that. We need to look forward to this feeling because it's only in meeting this feeling that is able to control your behavior so much, meeting it and wanting it, that we can learn how to do a different dance with it. Paradoxical intention would advise you to try and make that feeling bigger. So if I'm already feeling disconnected, how disconnected can I make myself feel? They do this sometimes with anxiety. When anxiety comes, trying to make the anxiety worse often has the opposite effect because anxiety feeds on itself. People are anxious about being anxious. And the last thing that will really help you with something like paradoxical intention is to try to have a bit of a sense of humor about it. I know that sounds like a big ask, but when we think about it, when we think about how big our minds can make something, when you think about how you can feel like the worst person in the world because you ate a lot of food, there's an absurdity to that. That it is possible to have a bit of a sense of humour. I see it in my groups. People are able to laugh at themselves a bit. And that's not laughing in a cruel way. That's just laughing at the absurdity of life and what it is to be a human being and the way that we tie ourselves up in knots. So I just want to reiterate, if you recognise yourself in this backwards law, this is not about saying or trying to get to a place where you don't care about recovery. Like, of course you do. If you're watching this video and you've stayed to the end, you care about this changing, how you feel changing and this behaviour changing. But what is it that the behaviour of binge eating enables you to avoid? And can you set a paradoxical intention to experience that? I'm not making it about the food at this stage because the food is complicated and there's so much conflict there. But the food is performing a function. So let's get underneath that and move towards that part, understand that part, experience that part, even love that part. And if you're struggling to identify what that part is, come back to that question. What is the feeling I really want to avoid? And I'm always interested in the answers that people come up with this question, because there's a few that come up a lot, and sometimes there's something that comes up that's just a bit unusual. And trust your instinct on that. And if you want to share what comes up for you, what it is you think you might be using food to avoid or manage, let us know in the comments below. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.